Welcome to The Chat. Come behind the inbound scenes of some of the world's fastest growing companies. For the past 10 years as Chatmetrics, we've had an exclusive inside view of how these industry leaders are revolutionising inbound marketing and sales across diverse sectors. Each week, we bring you conversations with top minds in marketing and sales who share insider secrets and strategies for driving inbound success. Join us on The Chat, your front row seat to the future of inbound. Today on The Chat, Kirk Drage, the startup coach who fixes what most founders get wrong. From Microsoft exec to Silicon Valley innovator, Kirk Drage now helps founders actually succeed by cutting through startup myths and focusing on what really works. As co-founder of LeapSheep, he's helped over 200 startups build traction, validate markets, and stop burning runway on the wrong things. Today, he breaks down how to avoid common traps, build a real go-to-market engine, and create momentum that investors can't ignore. Kirk, welcome to The Chat.
Hey, Terry, it's great to be with you.
Glad you could join us. Look, I want to jump straight in and probably get to one of the critical components of any startup, and that is that most startup founders seem to think that building a product is the hard part. But you argue and consistently that traction is the real test. What's the first sign a founder has real market traction and not just vanity metrics?
There's a couple of ways to answer that question, depending on how they are going to market. A lot of founders are not investing enough in that marketing to start with. And so they've got a fairly small community of people using their product. And so the signal, if you're going down that path, is often the satisfaction that you're getting from your customers. Customers are getting real outcomes. And so you've got a product that customers love using, and you can see that they're going to respend, whatever respend means for your business. That's a pretty good sign. And sometimes if you're doing yearly contracts, that can take a year to really know where the customers are respending. So that's a whole conversation in and of itself. But then there's another category of founders that actually start to do some marketing. And you can start to see some of that market pull when the community starts to engage around the problem space, particularly. Instead of pushing your product, if you're talking about the problems and the frustrations that customers have got around their problem, when you see customers engaging just in the problem, and they finally feel that someone gets them and they're being validated because there's no alternative good solution in the market, and that's another really good signal. It's a much better signal because it's a much cheaper signal to get to than the first one.
So it's the old adage of really trying to talk about things from the customer's perspective, which is the problems they're trying to solve, rather than push your product and features.
Yeah, there's that. And the second one is validating demand before you validate supply.
Excellent. And so you mentioned earlier, while we were chatting just before that, the difference between value-focused businesses versus others.
Yeah.
Can you just run us through your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I think I'm from the software world, and I think in the software space for a long time, the entire industry is gotten away with not necessarily being value-focused. And what I mean by that is a lot of software companies have been able to sell what I refer to as a bag of bits. Think about a CRM system. The vendor says, we've got this fabulous CRM system that can manage your pipeline, and you can do accurate forecasting and track your leads and blah, blah, blah. And what you get is a generic piece of software that you then have to customize for your particular business circumstances, which usually takes a lot of time and effort and a lot of deep understanding of your business to be able to turn that generic piece of software into software that's actually working for you. And most vendors are not interested in helping you with that last mile. They want to sell you the vision, sell you the software, and then they want to go off and make the next sale. Even the big companies like Salesforce, for example, you think about the average Salesforce sale, it typically involves some sort of integrator where Salesforce will maybe introduce the integrator, or the integrator will introduce Salesforce. The Salesforce sale will be done. But if it's a big size company, it might be a year before you're even actually using the software. Meanwhile, where's the vendor? The vendor's off making more sales. They're not worried about the customer, so they're not customer centric. And I think this is I'm not picking on Salesforce. I think this is a problem with the software industry is we've had so much value in just the potential of the tools, and there's been enough people that have got real value out of it that for the rest of us that haven't got as much value out of it, we keep buying into the dream. And I speak to customers every day that are deploying CRM systems, practice management systems, you name it. And they're just not getting the value that they thought they were going to get. And I think the companies that really shine are the ones that understand that they've got to help the customer with that last mile. And I think with the AI era that we're just entering now, that's going to be a radical difference between old SaaS, if we can call it that, and new SaaS in the AI world, because we can start to do outcome-based pricing and things like that.
I agree. I agree entirely. The prevalence of the lack of last mile support, if I think that's probably a good way to put it. We've seen it ourselves. It's been a source of new business for us as
Yeah.
people like Drift. Drift in particular has probably been the worst. I don't usually speak ill of. They're not really a competitor. They're software. We don't do software. We actually sit in their software for some clients. But we've had clients come to us that have been in over 12 months of implementation and
Wow.
still not getting the value that was promised at the beginning. And with
Yeah.
total frustration, they've literally parked it, paid the software because they're in contract that they couldn't exit,
Yeah.
paid the software, and then engaged us to sit in different software. It
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
it.
I mean,
We've had
I just look at
three
that as
clients like
massive
that.
business risk. If you're that software vendor that's selling like that, eventually it might not be now, it might not be next year, it might not be in 2 years' time, but eventually someone's going to come along and actually service your customer. And if
Absolutely.
that's not you, you're in trouble. And so maybe you've got a little window that you can survive. How long can you really keep that up?
So back to the first question around understanding you get market traction. What's your, and I think that the customer support part feeds into that because particularly in the early stages, you can't drop the ball when you've only got a handful of customers.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's your process for validating a startup's idea before they spend $1 on development? Can you walk us through a
Yeah.
real example?
That's a great question. And that's really the core of what our business is, helping founders get to product market fit with their product. And it's a longer journey than most people really realize, longer than most founders realize, and longer than most investors realize, actually, which is curious. And we have a 4-stage process to get to product market fit. The first stage we call pre-revenue market validation. And that's where you're doing as much as you can without actually building a product to validate all the biggest risks in the business. The second phase we call initial pilots. And this sort of follows the classic and good advice from Silicon Valley about doing things that don't scale. So look, again, for those biggest risks, look to validate those by working with paying customers. This is critical. You've got to take customers' money, because when you take their money, they demand that you deliver value in return. So you have to take their money to be forced to deliver value. And you don't want to overinvest in things that you know are not a risk. For example, we all know how to create secure software. We know how to create a light, reliable software. We know how to create beautiful and easy to use software. We know how to create a software that's reliable and has great uptime. So all of those things are not risks. And so you don't have to invest in those things too early. You need to invest in the things that are unique and special and different about your business that are risks, that are unproven. And so that's really what that initial pilot is all about. And it's about learning when the customer told you what they wanted, when you start to actually deliver that to them and observe what they do with that, were they true to their word? And it's not that customers are lying to you or misleading you or anything like that. It's just that when you're solving new kinds of problems, which is generally what startup founders are doing, customers don't know how to think about those new problems because they're new to them. A lot of problems that you're solving for customers, they either have decided are not solvable because it's just not economically viable. So they go, it'll be lovely to solve that problem, but we just can't do it. We just focus on other things. Or they've been doing it a completely different way. And so the way that you're proposing to do it or going to do it, they don't fully comprehend or understand. So they're on a learning journey with you. And so you need to both be on that learning journey together to figure out what's a great product experience that's going to get you to product market fit. And if you can create that satisfaction during that phase, that's generally manual and it's a bit frustrating because it's a bit cumbersome and slow. It's certainly not scalable and it's probably unprofitable for those deals. If you can get through that and you can prove that you can create reliable, genuine satisfaction and delight in the customer, then you can start focusing on how can we get leads at scale? Can we make the software reliable and beautiful and easy to use and blah, blah, blah. And then if all the metrics look good, then you can go to stage 4, which is actually scaling up. So they're the 4 stages that we have. But the first stage, which is really what you're asking about, is this pre-revenue market validation. That has 3 stages in it itself. And those 3 stages is investment validation. And so whether you're a founder that wants external capital or whether you're investing your own money and are going to bootstrap, you still need an investment mindset. And so when we talk about investor validation, either someone else is the investor or you're your own investor, and you should behave just like an investor that's dispassionately looking at somebody else's company and deciding, is that a good use of my capital and time?
Yep.
And so that's the first stage. And that a lot of that comes down to, if you are successful with this business model, is this a business model that's even worth the risks of building? And can you see ways to build competitive moats, for example, where you're not going to build a business, everyone goes, oh, look what they figured out, let's build a business just like them. There's a lot of that happens, right? So you want to get that right at the beginning. The
And
next
even
stage,
more so now, sorry to interrupt, but even more so now, I think with AI, it's so easy to build and keep together an MVP that
yeah,
can deliver an outcome regardless of what the back end looks like. That competitive mode is, I think, something that it will be harder and harder to build, to
yeah.
achieve.
Look, I mean, there's this whole micro SaaS thing that's exploded that you're probably aware of, where, that we've got there's the dream of the one founder unicorn, right? Where one founder is going to build $1 billion business. It's going to happen sooner or later. And there's a lot of what I call arbitrage opportunities, where there's a window you can leap in and grab it, and that window will close, and you probably have to go on and do something else, or you sell your business and get out. So there's a lot of those opportunities. I think they're fairly high risk, because if you get it wrong, or the window closes sooner than you expect, you may end up doing your money or your time, whatever. But if you're more thoughtful about an opportunity and invest in a compounding kind of way, in a capability to understand something, a bit like your business, you understand lead generation through chats. You've been doing it for a decade. I'm sure what you know now is, it's like a snowball, is so much more than you knew 10 years ago, because any expert in any field, you're seeing similar use cases over and over again. So you see more data than anybody else. So you recognize more patterns than anybody else. And so you can diagnose things quicker. You can recommend the right solutions quicker than people that just haven't seen the data that you've seen. And I
Absolutely.
think this is the problem for a lot of founders, is they're not structurally setting themselves up to see more data in a customer-centric way, become that expert, and package that expertise through software and sell it into a scalable solution. But anyway, that's the sort of investment validation side. And then the next phase is the segment validation, also called user research, where you're looking for, what's that first market segment that you can go into, that you can reach product market fit in. And if you're going to build a successful business, that investment vision needs to be much larger than the first segment. And so that first segment wants to be just big enough that it makes it worthwhile for you to put the investment in, and you're going to get a return on that investment. But it wants to be niche enough that you can really differentiate yourself from the competition and be able to stand out. And so going and figuring out, does the customer have the problem that you think they have? Is the market, as you've defined it, as homogeneous as you think it is? Or is there lots of different customers with lots of different problems? They're going to cause you pain. Because when you build a product, you want to build it once and sell it many times. You don't want to customize it every time.
Mm.
And so doing that user research to really understand that is really important. And then the last piece of this pre-revenue market validation, which is super important that very few founders do, is go into a co-development exercise with the customer on the solution. And that co-development word is really important, because you don't want to show a customer your product. Go, hey, I think I've got a solution to your problem. Because as soon as you show them a product, the customer feels shut out. They feel like you've gone away and developed something, come and shown it to them. What are they going to say? They don't want to call you baby ugly. So they're either going to say, I love this product. When can we implement it? It's perfect. I need it now. Or more likely, they're going to say, that's a brilliant product. It looks like really what we need, but we're just really busy at the moment. Can you come back in 6 months? Or just get a couple of customers first and come back to us.
Yeah.
And so you end up with this not really an authentic, open conversation with your customer, not giving you the feedback that you really need to improve your product. And so instead of doing that, you come to the customer with a concept of a product. And sometimes you have to take a product that you've already built, if you've made that mistake, like I had, and then you have to reverse engineer it into a concept. And the customer doesn't know that you've got a product, or if they do know, you can say, I'm working on the next version of the product. You can go with a concept and say, here's my kind of half-baked idea for the kind of way that I think we could solve your problem. What do you think? Am I heading in the right direction? If you were me, would you continue to invest in this path? What's good? What's not good? And so you enter into a more collaborative discussion with the customer. And the customer's got all the answers. They'll guide you into the direction. And once you've got statistically enough feedback from enough customers, you've now got a market opinion on your solution, and you can decide whether to go forward.
How often do you find founders are entering into a market, solving a problem that others are solving, So there's already solutions out there that they're not that differentiated about, but because they've niched, they've been successful, whereas others have struggled.
Help me understand your question. So it's a founder that it's the
For
niche.
instance, I think about the live chat software market. You've got
Yeah.
companies like Live Chat Inc., the big hundreds of thousands of users. You've had then a business like Drift. You've had Qualified. You've got Intercom. They're each playing in the virtually, if you looked at from the beginning to end of those products, they're all exactly the same. They do the
Right.
same thing. Live
Yeah.
chat software. They've all got chatbots. They all do the same thing, but they're in slightly different niches. For instance, Intercom focuses on support, Drift focuses on the conversational marketing category, as they've called it. That's a sad story. I'll talk about Drift. I want to get your thoughts on Drift if you're familiar with the story, but we'll chat about that one in a moment. But so each of those are virtually the same product.
Yeah.
Each of large in their own right and being successful in their own way.
Yeah.
Have you seen that happen with any founders that have started?
Yeah, for sure. This is the beauty of building companies is there's just so many problems to be solved. And I think, and also distribution matters a lot. And I think the story of those kind of companies, I don't know these companies specifically, but the stories of these kind of companies and why they can be successful when they look so similar is one, because they found slightly different niches for what, as you describe, is essentially exactly the same solution. So if you're working at the front end of a sales process versus the back end of a sales process or a support process, but your product essentially does the same thing, it's actually solving a different problem. It's a bit like, I don't know, if you're using a hammer, you can use it to build a cot or you can use it to build a house. It's still a hammer, but you could market a hammer as the cot building hammer or the house building hammer.
Yeah.
And again, it comes back to what I was saying earlier about the more similar use cases, the more expertise you build, the more patents. So you become, and this again, it comes back to if you are customer focused and you truly care about getting outcomes for your customer, then you can start to optimize in a way that your competitors can't. So even if those two companies that we just described wanted to start to attack each other's market, if they were really customer outcome focused, they would both find it very difficult because of this institutional knowledge that's been built up and hopefully wrapped up into the product. So that's certainly a big thing.
There was a new entrant. It wasn't Intercom. It was Qualified, I think, that attacked the Drift market, and unfortunately, Drift didn't have the customer focus and suffered consequently. They had a meteoric rise. The two founders had a huge exit to Vista, and then Vista's on-sold it now to Salesloft. I don't know what price, but I'm sure it wasn't a return for those guys.
There's another angle to that as well, and that it's very much a distribution thing, which is as audiences change, audiences want stories that are relevant to them. They feel understood and connected with. And this is why if you look in storytelling, the hero's journey can be told over and over again in new contexts. Yeah. Because the latest generation comes up, they don't know all about, they don't want to watch Star Wars. That's your grandparents watch Star Wars. You want something that's relevant to you, but you can have almost exactly the same story, just dressed up with different characters set in a different time, but the actual storyline's identical. And the kids will love it because they feel like it relates to them and their generation and what have you. And the same is true with software and business. If you've got a new social media platform like Instagram comes onto the scene and people start using it, and then someone starts marketing their solution on that platform and the users of that platform feel connected, you go, I don't want to use an old CRM system that was for the Facebook era. That's dad's CRM system. Well, that's a thing that works, right?
Yeah, fascinating. It does. So can you give me an example? A real life example of a customer that you've taken through that first market fit stage?
Yeah, we've got a few. What's a good one? Because I was talking to Marco from Hubble.sh recently. He has got a fabulous business that's looking at sustainability and comfort in the housing space. So energy efficiency, net zero. And that's a big complicated problem because there's lots of building materials and design issues that come together to either make a house energy efficient, make the value of that asset greater or less, and also make it comfortable and healthy to live in. So energy sustainability, we don't talk about it a lot, but there's a lot related to health when it comes to, if you've got a well-sealed house, it's got great energy efficiency with heat pumps and so forth. You don't get mold, you don't get drafts, you don't get all of those things that can actually cause a lot of health issues.
Yep.
And so he's working very closely with, and this is a journey, the case study is figuring out how do you build a solution for that market? Who exactly is the customer? Because there's so many players in that kind of ecosystem. There's tradies, there's builders, there's developers, there's material suppliers, there's regulators, councils, there's industry bodies. Who exactly is the customer? Who's going to pay? Who are the users? And we've been working with him over a number of years as he's gone through the process that I've just described of looking at, from an investment validation point of view, this seems like a fabulous opportunity. Housing market is obviously huge. It's not only huge in Australia, but it's huge globally. The problems that we're experiencing here are problems that are global. When you start to dig down, a lot of countries have similar problems. There's design problems, there's material problems, there's installation problems, there's certification problems. So from an investment point of view, it looks like a fabulous business.
Yep.
The question is, who's the customer? Who's going to pay? Who are the users that need to be involved? What's the experience that you need to create? And can that be done cheaply enough and deliver enough value that you're not going to run out of money trying? And so he's been down a fairly rigorous process of talking to all of those different groups to understand who's got the most motivation, who is the problem just an interesting problem for, and who is the problem where it's a pants on fire problem. And one of the areas that he's really focusing on is helping construction material manufacturers be able to articulate the benefits of the construction materials that they're delivering. So think about things like windows, insulation, these kind of products.
Steel
If
versus
you're a
timber
renovator,
framing.
exactly. If you're a renovator or a home builder, it's a really tough thing to like say, what brand of windows are you going to choose, Terry, for your renovation? You're like, I don't know. Well, that's a hard question, right?
Steg bar all the way, mate.
Yeah. And Marco's been through that process, and he's got now some great engagement with those construction material manufacturers, because they put a huge amount of effort. If you imagine you're a window builder, right? And you want to create a product that's affordable, but also that's going to create great performance in the house, where you're going to lower your energy bills. It's going to be more healthy. But if the customer doesn't understand those benefits, and the builders don't know how to install it properly to make sure that you do get those benefits, then what's the point of putting all that R&D into building a fabulous set of windows? And so Marco's been down that whole journey, and I think he's solving a really hard problem, and he's doing it in a way that is just incredibly capital efficient, and not doing the typical thing that you see in startup land. Is I see an opportunity, let's build a product and launch it onto the world and see if we can hire some sales and marketing people and push it onto people.
It sounds like an extraordinarily rigorous process. And look, it's one area in particular that I'm familiar with, having come from the steel industry in Australia. I've seen,
Yeah.
I know the building industry pretty well as well. There's a difference between understanding the benefits and valuing the benefits as well.
Yeah.
They may well
Yeah.
understand the benefits, but it's like you said earlier, who's going to pay for it versus who's it just an interesting concept
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
Oh, look, this whole things we're going through at the moment with net zero targets from a country's perspective, but nobody wants to pay the power bills that it's going to take us to get there, and but the short-term pain for a potential longer-term gain.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But that's all opportunity. It's a great thing about once you learn this process that I'm describing, and while it is fairly rigorous, the idea is it needs to be cheap. So you need to be able to very cheaply and very quickly collect a lot of data to be able to make better decisions, because that's the limiting factor for founders that are building startups. Is their data limited? They don't have the right data to make the decisions. And so you have to begin to optimize your company for learning. It's the speed and cost of learning that you need to optimize for. And that's what so few founders do, is they start to think about, how to optimize for growth. I want to build a product and start chasing revenue targets, and investors push them down that path. Government grant and support programs push them down that path, but it's the wrong thing to do. So while it's rigorous, I don't want to give anybody the impression that it's arduous and expensive, because it should be the opposite of that. It should be agile and fast.
Look, with your experience in Silicon Valley, I mean, you talk about fast. It's a complete fast means something completely different there to what most 99% of founders are experienced or used to, I would imagine.
So true.
I've seen
So
businesses
true.
move at absolute lightning speed in terms of, they're talking weeks, days and weeks in terms of test and modify and test again and back into the market, not 3 months to make something and then come back and test it again, like a large brand would be launching a new brand, for instance, or a new product. Just a quick aside question. I know your
I-
focus is on software companies. Have you run this process for any service businesses?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we're technology focused. We're not just software. We don't do things like drug discovery and get involved in those sort of areas. Anything that's sort of software or smart devices tends to make a lot of sense for us. But services business is an interesting one because most service business owners, if you sit them down, and particularly if they've been running for any length of time, and say, "Do you like your business?" The answer usually comes back if the business is performing okay, it's providing me a great salary, my lifestyle is good, I've got a lot of staff headaches, I'm managing feast and famine because it's hard to run a services business to employ really high quality people and keep them fully utilized. And boy, it'd be good if I could run a product business and have that more scalability and manage the risk of all of those up and downs. And so we find so many services business have either got dreams or aspirations of turning into a product business or spinning out a product business as well as their service business that they haven't acted on because they don't know how to do it, or they have acted on it and they're starting to go down that process and they're learning all the lessons.
And it's very different, isn't it? A product is
Oh,
very different to
I think it's
service.
one of the hardest things is to pivot from a services business where when you speak to a customer and you say, "What would you like?" And the customer says, "Jump this high." And you say, "Okay, I'll jump." That's a sort of a services business. But in a product business and the customer says, "Can you jump this high?" You go, "Wait right there. Let me go speak to another 20 customers. And if all those 20 customers want me to jump the same height, then I might jump that high." So you've got to do all this pre-work before you say yes to a customer in a product business.
It's really interesting. We almost feel that we are in betwixt both of those, product and a service business, for the simple reason that we've niched so tightly down into that very specific point of we sit in live chat software and turn unqualified or anonymous website visitors into qualified buyers. The
Yep.
little piece that we do is when you get a website form fill come through and somebody has to put the effort in to track them down, get in touch, find out whether they're a good fit, and then maybe either continue the conversation themselves to try and get them into the pipeline or book them with a sales executive. That's that little mechanism that we do. And it's not productized, obviously. There's people involved. Where the team of people that are doing this for us and executing it, our team, we're pretty blessed in terms of not having the headaches. My background and experience, I think, in terms of setting up the processes, the recruitment processes, the training processes, et cetera, has put us in pretty good stead to make sure that there's less ripples than there would be normally. And it also allows us to say no. I have clients that ask us, "We want more website visitors. Can you help us with SEO?" You know
Yeah.
what? We can, but I'm not
Yeah.
going to.
But we don't want to. Yeah.
That's right. Because as soon as we start to walk down that path, that agency type path, I think that'll be the day that the headaches start. And so we stay
Yeah.
focused, and I'd much rather refer. I'd rather have
Yeah.
good partners that we know that deliver a quality service, and then
Yeah.
I'll refer to solve our clients' problems from those perspective as opposed to broaden our service. We dipped our toe in the water very briefly about also managing inbound emails.
Yep.
There wasn't really that much of interest for it from our clients,
Mhm.
particularly with where we're sitting. So I dropped it and didn't really worry about pushing it too much further. If the demand wasn't there with our existing clients who really are in that sweet spot of where I would expect there
Yeah.
would have been some demand for it
Yep.
and where we already have the relationship,
Yeah.
then
Exactly.
yeah, it's not something that's going to be
Yeah.
overly
Good
concerned.
experiment. Good experiment. Yeah.
So it's interesting.
When I think about services businesses, I think about service business in 3 tiers. I think about what I call genius consultants. These are consultants that will take on any project in their field and they go, "I've never done this before, but you're paying me because I've got so much experience that if you want me to build a passive house to 50 stars that's never been done before, but let's figure it out together." And there's certain consultants that are at that level that they get employed for those kind of jobs.
Yeah. And they will solve those problems.
And they will. Yeah. And they've got a great business. They'll be paid a fortune if they find customers that are willing to pay for it. They'll have a very good business. The problem is that it's very difficult to find and engage multiple people at that level. So it's always going to be a very small, bespoke, boutique kind of business. And that's okay. Some people love that kind of business. The second tier this is where the big four play, where you've got some senior experience people, generally they're the partners, they'll go and win some business. And then you have some junior people. And it's a combination of the senior people looking after the junior people that you can deliver a service that hasn't been productized, but there's enough reusable knowledge and there's enough repeatability that you can make a business model of senior and junior people together to deliver an outcome. And that's how the big four make their money. And then the third tier, which is where I would put you guys, is where you've really productized a service. You've really created very strong systems and processes. You know exactly what you will do, what you won't do. And so you stay in your lane and you just get better and better. And over time, your processes get better and better, both your customer experience and your employee processes. And that's where you're right to, and I think AI is really going to start to accelerate this trend, is where for businesses like yourself, you're going to start to move as, I think there's a name for it now, there's services software is the new name for that kind of business that now starts to use AI to deliver a lot of what you've delivered. It's like a services business. It's more outcome focused than software, which tends to be more output focused. And I think we're going to see a massive rise in those kind of businesses in the next 10 years.
Yeah, I agree. I agree entirely. Entirely. So where do you find most founders completely screw up their go-to-market strategy? And what would you do instead in those early stages?
How much time have you got? Yeah, there's more lessons to be learned here than I've screwed up in more ways than I could imagine that was possible on this front. So many, so many ways to fail at this. It's crazy. But I think we've talked about the big one, and that is building a product before you really start to focus on building your marketing.
Yes.
And I think you can see a little bit of momentum starting in the market and understanding that personal brand for founders is something they should invest in. And I'm a huge advocate in this. And I say to founders, look, even if your idea is terrible, nobody wants it, and you end up in 6 or 12 months' time closing down your business, you can still walk away with a better personal brand than you had when you started. And that's going to set you up for whatever you do, whether you want a job or another startup, that's going to set yourself up for success. So there's no downside for building a personal brand properly. And you just got to find a way that you can do it in a way that you're comfortable with. Some people are more or less comfortable with talking publicly. You might be an introvert or an extrovert, and there's different approaches that you can use that's going to make you comfortable, and different levels of sort of public profile. A lot of those issues I've found that I can work through with founders. And so that would be the number one thing, is build that personal brand. Sort of old school thinking, certainly where I come from in my previous corporate life, is the brand comes first and people come second. And I think we're seeing that flip.
Yep.
And certainly for startup founders, that it's flipping for corporates too, by the way, which is interesting. But certainly for startup founders, if you had the choice of trying to create a logo and a name and drive recognition and value into that thing, thinking about how much that would cost you to do that versus you just be you and try and get people to recognize you as an individual, which one's going to be faster and cheaper? Like, it's obviously the second one, right? And so if you care at all about capital efficiency, which you should as a business owner, you'd choose the second path every time. And then over time, you can start to put value into your brand, because people are like, oh, you're not just Terry, you're Terry from ClickChat. So people know you because of that over time. Yeah. So that's probably the number one piece of advice I'd give any founder, like that, go down that path.
It's interesting. And we are seeing a lot more of that now, this founder-led growth, particularly through LinkedIn. Adam Robinson in particular from RB2B, Alex from Warmly. You see these guys that are really starting to build in public. That's the other piece that they're doing.
Yeah.
It's interesting when you've got a bit more of an established business, there's not so much build in public side of it that goes on. And when you've got business partners, etc., you're going to be potentially less open with the financial results and so forth. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that you can't put across successes, wins, customer stories, all of the trials and tribulations that you've had on the way. And there's certainly been plenty of those. I know personally I've been a lot more active on LinkedIn since November. Yeah. And I was, one of the things that held me back from the beginning of getting much more involved, there was two things. Firstly, the last time I did it, I didn't see any value. I didn't see any inbound inquiries come. There wasn't much traction. I think that's probably what's driven me. I mentioned before that been interested in copywriting over the last 18 months. Yeah. And I kicked off LinkedIn again in November, and it just felt different. I've been sharing it was much more salesy what I was doing before. I was selling all the time, trying to sell the product, whereas now it's much more story-based, sharing information that I've seen, insights and observations on stuff that happens. And even the personal stuff, as interesting as it is, I find I never would have considered sharing personal information about how I felt about terminating somebody before November. I did it over Christmas. And one of those posts just went, for me, absolutely viral.
Yeah.
And it was like, this is just crazy
It's
that
worked.
people would be so interested in it. But I guess there was some value in it as well. It wasn't just a conversation about how I felt. It was things that I'd put in place that helped me feel that way and to manage it, et cetera, et cetera. So I think my whole philosophy has changed from, it's not that my philosophy's changed. I think it's the execution. I've always led with this feeling of delivering value. I want to deliver value. But in my mind, the shift has been, instead of trying to deliver value through my product or my offering, I'm now trying to deliver value as advice to others. It's still niched around the area and certainly at the audience that our product or our offering services, but it's much broader now than just that as well.
Yeah. It's such an important shift. I'm on the same journey. And I think we come from that time past when, from the corporate point of view, that was almost frowned on. You didn't share your personal opinion. It was all about the corporate front and being a good corporate employee. And so you've got to unlearn some of those things. And I think if you can help a founder start from the get-go in authentically sharing it, it's almost the opposite to the fake it till you make it. It's like,
exactly.
let me just share how hard it is and the challenges that I've got. And it just makes you so much more relatable. And it draws people towards you. And I think you're right. If you've got this, if you're not trying to sell people, and this is the thing about marketing, which, took me a long time to learn, is it is about helping. People will buy from you when they're ready. If you just keep helping, people will buy from you when they're ready.
Yeah. True. And you just got to be able to hang in there long enough for that to happen. And look, particularly when you're founders and you don't have huge buckets of cash, look, and I guess it's probably somewhat different with funding versus bootstrapping.
Yeah.
There's a different focus and a different path. But I reflect on your comment earlier about measuring yourself and executing as a bootstrapper as though you are externally funded and have that external set of eyes on it.
Yeah. You've also got to categorize the types of investors that are out there. In Australia, it's often said we don't really have a VC industry. And most of our VCs are more like private equity firms. They want to see growth, proven growth history before they put money into you. And that's not really what a VC is. Terry, you've got a crazy idea. I don't know whether it's going to work, but I think it's crazy enough to try. And I'm going to try this crazy idea thing with 20 other people that have got a great ability to execute. And I know that 75% of them are going to fail, but let's give it a go.
Yeah. And hopefully one of them becomes a unicorn.
Yeah, exactly. But the goal in that first period of the company is not growth. If you listen to someone like Vinod Khosla, who invested into OpenAI, and his investment thesis, he wasn't asking what product that they've got and what's their revenue. His technology could be so revolutionary. I don't know where it's going to go. I just know that it's a fantastic new capability, and I feel I need to invest in it and see what happens.
Yep.
It turned out to be a good bet. And I'm sure there's those bets that don't turn out to be so good. But that's really the game of VC, is you're looking for disruptive innovation, something that's going to be like an order of magnitude better than what already exists. Yep. And so I think that's important when you think about investors.
And what do you find in the Australian market then? Is there that level of VC? Is there
not most of the founders that we work with are bootstrapping, or they are being encouraged to scale to chase financial targets when they're not really ready. And the best thing we can do is engage the investors and help them understand that, look, we could scale this business as it is, and we can just have a really hard time of it because our definition of the market is not as good as it needs to be. Our definition of the problem is not as good as it needs to be. Sure, we've made some sales. You might have a few $1 million in revenue, and you might think at that point, well, if you got a few $1 million in revenue, of course you should scale. But if you don't have a great definition of your customer profile, if you haven't really validated what channels you should be in, if you haven't got a great no-brainer offer that's got higher conversion rates, and if you're not doing that sort of nurturing-based sales that we were just talking about, and you're doing hard selling, and you're pushing every outbound call that you make, you're trying to turn it into a sale, your product's probably not where it needs to be. What did Fred Wilson, famous VC, said? Marketing's a tax for people with bad products. And I think that's certainly the longer term view of most founders, quite rightly, is they want to get to something called product-led growth. And that's what Netflix got to. That's what Slack got to. That's what Uber ride sharing, not Uber Eats, got to, where like you experience this Uber ride sharing and you can't wait to tell your friends and your colleagues, I just had the most amazing experience. It was like a taxi, but nothing like a taxi. You've got to try it.
Yeah.
And that's product-led growth. And then marketing becomes more of a fulfillment engine. And so you think about the kind of work that you do, you get customers coming in going, I want to buy the product, but so help me buy the product. I've heard it's awesome. So you're not having to sell, you're more facilitating buying as opposed to selling.
Yeah. It's fascinating. We see that. So we see the whole spectrum where
Yeah.
we see websites that predominantly have massive traffic, but a very small amount of ICP ready to buy.
Yeah.
And conversely, and they're spending a lot of money on marketing, and they're very large, successful companies, and they're getting a lot of leads, but it's just in comparison, when I look at the ratios of traffic to conversions, it seems almost bizarre that there's so much budget being spent to bring this big chunk of traffic through. I understand the strategy is to have that level of traffic that lifts them as far as their rankings are concerned. But on the flip side, we've also seen websites where they're very early stage businesses, where the founder is doing the outbound virtually themselves, whether it's calling or email campaigns, etc., and very low website traffic, but converting at 15%.
Yeah.
And it's because they're not doing any marketing to bring anybody to their website that's not interested in their product. It's their outbound they're doing via email that's piquing the interest of somebody in the messaging that they've sent. So they're coming to check them out now. And then all of a sudden, it's like there is an opportunity to have that conversation and convert into pipeline and so forth. But it's fascinating the difference in terms of the different approach between outbound driven sales. I'll call it outbound is still marketing in my mind. It's still marketing. You're
for
not
sure.
selling until you're actually engaged in a
Yeah.
conversation. So
Yeah.
outbound marketing versus inbound marketing, there's a huge difference in terms of cost and results. I've also seen businesses that have been stuck in outbound marketing that have just absolutely floundered. How can early stage teams avoid a Frankenstein GTM, that patchwork of tactics with no real unifying strategy and not sure
Yeah.
what's coming from where?
Yeah, it's a great question. I like to reference the ZMOT study, the Zero Moment of Truth study from Google, which talks about B2B brands typically buy from vendors that they've consumed 7 hours of content, had 11 interactions across 4 channels. Now, whether you believe that's true or not for your business, I think thematically it's correct. You want to have this mindset of nurturing your customers, and therefore you need to assume that they're going to interact with your business and you over multiple channels. For most B2B businesses, I think the solution is pretty obvious. It's like your website, that's more of a placeholder because a lot of early stage startups are not doing business through their website. It's more likely to be LinkedIn. And so LinkedIn's critical. And LinkedIn has 2 key legs to it in the early stages. It has more, but just in the early stages, your content marketing, where you're posting and talking about the problems that your customers got, and you're building the open thing that we talked about earlier, are 2 great content themes. Then you're doing your outbound DMs, your direct messages, and having conversations. And then probably a YouTube to have some more in-depth content for medium and long form video when people go, yeah, this Terry guy really seems to know what he's talking about. I like to spend a bit more time with him to understand. And that's where a YouTube kind of makes sense. They're probably your 4 channels. Now, if you're a B2C company, or if you're in a market segment that needs another social platform, you might be on Insta or on another platform. But for many B2B businesses, they're the obvious 4. And so then you need a very seamless and consistent experience for customers that are bouncing between those 4 channels. And they can clearly see it's the same company. Everything looks like it's part of the same message and story centered around the customer. But there's nothing worse. You see it all the time where you go in store to a retailer and you have this experience, and then you go to the website and there's clearly 2 different executives running this business. And I feel like they're 2 different companies because they essentially are, right? And all those big companies are scrambling to try and fix that now. When you're a startup, you've got the opportunity from day one to go, we need to create a seamless omni-channel experience for our customers from day one. And that's, to me, that's the obvious strategy. So content marketing plus outbound outreach through DMs.
And do you find that, is it typically 3 platforms, 4 platforms they should be on? Anybody obviously that's playing in that B2B space, LinkedIn's a bit of a no-brainer. I think lately it's coming to the fore It's almost that what you mentioned about YouTube, it's almost as though I feel that YouTube's even coming to the fore more since TikTok. And now they've
Yeah.
extended their longer shorts that they've brought in as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
It's almost to me that TikTok's not sustainable, whereas YouTube's sustainable. I feel like TikTok's here and gone, whereas
I mean,
YouTube's more of a
TikTok's great for
foundation.
top of the funnel awareness. I think about TikTok a bit like it's a bit like a night market in Bangkok, right? You don't go there because you're going to find the world's best suit. You go there because you want to be entertained. It's, oh, look at that crazy outfit. You wouldn't see that in a shop back home. And so it's a novel, fun, interesting experience where you learn about new things. You don't go there for in-depth education experience, generally speaking.
Yeah,
But you do find interesting people that you might not have bumped into before. And I think I first learned about Rory Sutherland. I don't know if he's
I do.
I think Ogilvy guy from the UK. I learned about him on TikTok. And now I mostly, if your video pops up on YouTube, I watch his YouTube videos. So it's a great discovery platform. TikTok is a great discovery platform. YouTube, as you say, is much better for longer form content, for nurturing. And don't forget, it's the world's second largest search engine.
Yeah,
And so people are going to find, it depends on your product category and what you're doing, people will find you there. So I think YouTube makes a ton of sense for people to be in.
yeah, yeah. I agree. I agree. Is there one overlooked signal that founders or that tells you that a founder has nailed their go to market?
It's a good question. I think it's different for many businesses, but what really comes to mind when you ask that question is what happens before you nail your channel. And that is, do you really understand who your customer is and what their problem is? And do the customers have budget to solve that problem? And that's usually the problem. When people come to me and say my channel's broken, usually it's not their channel that's broken. They think their channel's broken. What's actually broken is they've got a poor definition of their customer and their problem. And so therefore their channel performance is bad because they're either in the wrong channel or got the wrong message. And if you build on what we just said, that if you're a B2B company, it's very likely for maybe 80% of use cases that LinkedIn is going to be the right platform. And you're going to want to use a combination of cold outreach DMs to connect with people and content inbound. Content's going to take a little bit longer for that flywheel to get going and the inbound to come. Good thing with the outbound, it's going to be pretty quick. And so those two things together work very well. For businesses where that's not the formula, you need to look on a business by business basis.
Yeah.
Like some businesses, like I'm working with people in the hospitality and restaurant industry, and they're like, a lot of restaurant owners are just not on LinkedIn. So it's not a platform. We got to find those people. So you've got to come up with a different solution for those kind of businesses.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's been a struggle for me, quite frankly, because we sit in that no man's land between marketing and sales. So first point of contact is usually marketing leaders because they own the
Yeah.
website, but we're actually operating as an extension of the sales team,
Yeah.
and they like to be involved. And it's been fascinating to watch sometimes the friction between marketing and sales when
Yeah.
you're talking to one and not the other, or you're trying to get them both in a room, and you can just sense that okay, this everything's not okay here.
Yeah.
And there's been times where I've seen with us being involved that all of a sudden the quality of the leads is lifted, sales are happy, marketing's happy, and everything starts to gel, and they're working
Yeah.
much closer together than they have in the past as well.
Yeah.
I always tend to think that, particularly with early go to market models, I think my indication that they've made it is that they are getting inbound leads, that
Yeah.
there is actually inbound coming in,
Yeah. Sure.
because I think that is, and consistently, not just one or two,
Yeah.
but actually got a position where they've got consistent inbound
Yep.
leads coming in.
Yeah. We work a little bit like we see that, but it's for later stage companies. Like when you've only got 1, 2, 3, 400 customers, it's unusual to see inbound leads because you're just too early. You're just too early. So that's why I didn't immediately come to that answer for the question, because we're in a slightly different space.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing that's interesting for most companies, and this is, we do a bit of work with established companies, particularly those that are trying to spin out. It's interesting. I just did something I did a presentation for the Family Business Association, and it's scary how similar a very long established business is to a startup when they're forced or want to innovate. They're either entering a new market or need to build a new product. All the problems that startups have, they suddenly have got to deal with. And they're facing all the same sort of challenges. And typically when you're trying to figure out, have I got a business model that's working? And this might be different to your customers, I'm not sure. If you're working with dentists or lawyers or construction companies, like they're all very established business models. And we've got thousands of examples of people that are running successful businesses in those areas. And so you're not questioning whether the business model is a viable business model or not. What we're doing every day is questioning, have we got a business model that is even worth building and even worth scaling?
Mm.
And when we think about where are the problems, there's usually three core places. It's either a marketing problem, it's a sales problem, or it's a product problem. And so I think about the product manager who owns the product problem. So what market are we in? Solving what problem with what solution at what price? That's really that's really the product management issue. And then the execution on the marketing side is like, well, what channels should be in, what messages, what mix of channels, so on and so forth. How are we generating that trust and credibility? How are we educating our customer and raising the lead temperature of our customers to get them to want to buy? And then sales, how are we getting them into a conversation and helping the customer buy? Because that's the goal of sales.
Gee, mate, you know what? You're really making me rethink my whole positioning. You are. It's on the basis that the end product of our product is pipeline.
Yeah.
It's deals in the pipeline. And we've been banging on at marketing all this time because that's where they feel the pain, because it's their
Yeah.
responsibility to deliver pipeline through the website. But the ones that are actually the buyers are sales. It's the
Yeah.
sales leaders. They're the
Yeah.
ones that they're wanting the early engagement with the website visitors, with their prospective buyers.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that I'm going to have quite a pivot in messaging over the next month or so and just see what happens.
It's always the way. One of the challenges that a lot of businesses fall into is they have a bit of divide and conquer strategy. So they hire a marketing person, a salesperson, a product person, and they're all running their own little fiefdoms. And you actually got to bring them together and say, look, we exist as a system.
Yeah.
It's a bit, building a business model is a bit like building a sports car. You can't just go find the world's biggest engine and go, that's what we're going to use. And there's a lot of marketing teams that do that. Like the HubSpot, we're going to bring the HubSpot engine in and we're going to thunk it down on the table and we're going to tune it until we're left. And that's the approach that people take instead of thinking, as you say, how do we get the pipeline working as a seamless pipeline to drive that awareness, nurture through to sales where we can make those no-brainer offers and then deliver a brilliant experience that customers just have to talk about because they love it so much. It's the loop around the funnel again. And there's not enough businesses that are thinking of that system.
Yeah. Okay. It's interesting. My cogs were turning inside. I heard what you said then, but I was actually very internally focused at that point in time. Because it's been the biggest challenge for me, quite frankly, in
Yeah.
messaging is who am I talking to? You want to talk to one person. Am I talking to the sales leader or am I talking to the marketing leader?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I've tried to mix it up so that there's a bit of both.
Yeah. Businesses like yours exist to solve problems that customers can't solve for themselves.
Yeah.
And as a consequence, it's a bit like going to a lawyer. If you've got a contract dispute or whatever, you go there because they're an expert and they're going to help you through this. I'm not the expert. You're the expert. Help me through this. And so that's very much, what your business is. It's what our business, a lot of businesses. So what the customers think they need is often what they want is not what they need.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to market to what the customers want and then sell them what they need as the expert. You come with chest pains, so you need a quadruple bypass. That's not what I wanted,
Yeah.
but maybe that's what I need.
Yeah. Look, and the reality is, I want more leads. Most businesses say they want more leads.
Yeah.
I've found that rarely is more leads ever the solution. It's not the problem that they've got in most cases. Certainly with established businesses that have got a sales and marketing team in the fields where we play, because there's got to be inbound traffic. There's got to be a volume of traffic coming through the website from whatever sources. There have to be potential customers of our client, but there is invariably this point of I want more leads. Every time we look at the problem that they've got, it's not more leads. They want more conversions. It's not more leads. What they need is more deals. And there's a big gap between those two.
Yeah, very much.
We can give more leads. In fact, I always position it like this. Look, if you're getting 20 leads a month, inbound leads a month now through your form fills,
Yeah.
that will be that might be 400 form fills to actually,
Yeah.
instead of 20 or say 20 deals, if you're getting 20
Mm.
pipeline deals a month, you could be getting up to 400 form fills.
Yeah.
Some you
Yeah.
can't get back in touch with, some you look at and disqualify yourself anyway, but there's all
Yeah.
that effort. The others you get back in touch with, you go through that normal process. There's all of that pain. It's not more
Yeah.
leads are the issue, it's the deals
Yeah.
is the issue.
Yeah.
And that's the
It's
component.
that sales qualified leads. I think that's the big thing that I find with people that say they need more leads is they're in this sort of transactional selling mindset to go, I need to identify a hot lead that I can pitch to. And so that's the wrong mindset. It's like you need to identify a marketing qualified lead, which is another way of saying that is who is my ideal customer profile? We use the term ICP.
Yep.
When you're finding a marketing qualified lead or when you're identifying your ideal customer profile, that is not a trigger to go harass them to buy. That's a trigger to start to nurture them. And so that's then a process, the nurturing process that we talked about, the 7-11-4 thing, where you take them through that process and eventually they turn into a sales qualified lead where now they actually want to buy something.
Yeah.
And so that's really what people are needing. They don't realize they need that in many cases. They don't realize they need this sort of flipping mindset from transactional push sales to nurture pull sales.
And nurture pull sales, people don't, I've seen many marketers that actually push. So a quick story. We were working and our point of contact was a demand gen manager. One of her KPIs was the number of leads that she generated. And a lead was an email address, effectively. You get an email
Right.
address, someone's downloaded something.
Yeah.
And so we were sitting in live chat that she was responsible for. On the front end of that, they had a chat bot which said, I want your email address. Like, regardless of everyone that came in wanted your email address. And I said, look, the amount of traffic that you've got, there's a disconnect here somewhere. There's a problem. And for 6 months, I said, look, we're at the stage now where I'm going to cancel the agreement. I think I'm doing you a disservice. We're not getting the conversion rates we should be. This isn't of a scale where it's working for us. And she said, but my bonus depends on getting these leads. And I said, I'll pay your bonus. Take the qualification off the front of this chat. I'll pay your bonus if we don't give you more emails and by way of fully qualified booked meetings than what you did last month.
Yeah.
And it was 6 times.
Wow.
Like, she doesn't get it. Like, she didn't get it. She gets it now and understands.
Yeah.
The drop off, people in those early stages, you can say you want to grab someone's details and nurture. The best nurture you can give is anonymous conversations as they come back 5 and 6 times through their research, because you're the one that's there while they're doing their early stages of research to frame the conversation. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that was a mind blow. And there's another very specific example, which I often talk about, where we increased it by 21 times when they took when they take the chat qualifier off the front end.
Yeah.
People are getting so sick of filling in forms and handing over email addresses and getting bombarded, because these days it's not just spam in your inbox. You end up seeing the advertising follow you around everywhere you go on the internet,
That's
whether
right.
it's at your desktop or your phone. But I think people are just getting sick of it. So,
and of course, these outbound transactional sales engines are getting easier with AI. Even the voice bots, right? You're getting called by AI agents now that are pitching you.
exactly.
And it's like, go away. But I always ask founders, how much brand damage are you doing if you're doing that kind of selling, where people would go, I just don't want to deal with this company, because if that's how they behave, that's not the kind of people I want to deal with.
Yeah, exactly. Look, shifting gear a little bit now, I'd like to talk about the founder psychology and mindset. And you've coached hundreds of founders. What mindset shifts do they need to make early if they want to survive in the first 18 months?
Yeah, it's great. It's a great question. And the answer is there's actually a lot of them. This is something that we've had to unpack over many years. Is there one big thing? I would say probably not, but there's lots of little ones. We talked about some of them already. So things like customer centricity. Do you care more about the customer outcome than the customer cares about themselves? That's a good mindset to have. Are you more problem focused than solution focused? That's another good one. Are you focused on growing for learning before you grow for growth? Where you're learning, particularly because we're working with startup founders that are trying to prove a business model. Are you focused on proving that business model is worth scaling before you attempt to scale it? And that's an epiphany for a lot of founders that haven't even considered the business that they are attempting to build might not be worth just scaling. If I can get one customer, that means I can get 10. If I can get 10, that means I can get 100. Let's just follow that thread. And that's a disaster. That is a disaster that kills so many startups. So that, yeah, there's dozens of these little ones. And this is something that we track through our coaching, is these mindset shifts, because that's where we have the biggest impact. Is you can find education out there on the internet of how to do things. You can buy great books from various people. Founders can get access to that stuff. The problem that founders really have is they don't know what they don't know, and they need someone to help them work that out. And that's what do you want versus what do you need thing. We need to help them with a problem. And then we need to help them with the mindset thing and develop the mindset in the way that's actually going to help them use their time and resources in a really effective way. Because that's the problem of all founders. It's just the problem that I had in spades, is just spending your resources badly because you don't know any better. And you don't want to spend all of your resources learning how to spend your resources, and then you're out of resources. Like, now I know how to use them, I don't have any. Well, that's the problem that we really solve for founders.
It's
and
interesting.
investors, interestingly.
An investor. So
Yeah.
have you seen the founder landscape change in the last 5 years? And I'm referring, as we've come through the pandemic, and then now the economy's changed. The pandemic has seen this whole hustle culture where there's been some an influx of founders and side hustles.
Yeah.
Have you seen it change?
Yeah, there's a lot that's changed. The personal branding thing is one big thing. So people are more comfortable building a personal brand and starting to get out there and have conversations. I think there's a greater number of people that have a desire and a willingness to act on that desire to start their own company. It seems the barriers are lowering. I think people are getting less scared of software. So there's a lot of non-technical founders that go, I don't know anything about software. I don't understand how that works. I can't possibly start a software business. That barrier is slowly being overcome. And there's a lot of support for female founders out there, which is fabulous. So we're seeing a lot more confidence and willingness of women to have a go, where previously they may not have. You can start to see some of the role models out there. It was hard 20 years ago. It was hard to find female founders that you could point to and go, look at the success over there.
Yep.
But so that's absolutely fabulous. I think there's a lot of people that are also later stages in their career that are also willing to have a go. It's being a founder is it is a bit of a young person's game, because it does take a long time to build a business in most instances. And so it's hard if you've got kids in school and a mortgage and blah, blah, blah. It is really hard. But I think it is getting easier, and all those things are changing. Products are obviously getting radically easier to build. When I started in the startup world, you had to set up your own data center and build racks and screw servers into racks, and you had to raise millions of dollars before you could actually write a line of code. So that's changed massively over the last couple of decades. And I think that trend is continuing with AI. You look at the agentic kind of solutions that you're seeing now, where you're pulling all these agents together to create solutions. That's the functionality that now a couple of people can build into a solution is astounding. That's changing a lot. But the distribution side is changing massively too, which is the personal brand that we talked about. The YouTuber phenomenon, I think, has helped people understand how they can communicate with people better. And so I think it's really interesting for founders that want to build more of a typical product-based business to service business. They're now looking at the YouTubers and going, actually, they're real talented creators that are great at communication and storytelling and education. And boy, we need that. And now that I can see how they do it, I can start to emulate that. I think that's fabulous. So yeah, it's changed massively. It's a constantly move. And capital obviously has changed massively too in the last a decade or more.
I think there's also, this is a little side shoot, but I think there's also influencers as a channel now too.
Yeah.
Where in each of the industry niches, there's particular YouTubers or influencers that have a presence, they have an audience that you can have affiliations and referral partnerships with those.
Well, what I think's interesting on the influencer side is a lot of people get it wrong in terms of, if I just had an influencer, I could push my product onto the market. And that's back to that sort of transactional thinking. I think the kind of conversation that you and I are having now, where you've got a business, I've got a business, there's a little bit of overlap in the middle, we're interested. It's that kind of collaboration that adds value to your audience, that adds value to my audience. We learn something from each other. Like it's just all win value add.
Yes.
And I think it's those kind of things that are really making the most impact, and more people that discover that and find that and start doing that, it's creating more value for everyone.
I agree entirely. With the changes in founders in particular, I was curious about the characteristics of the founders themselves? Have you found that there has the belief that you've had to change, so that you spoke about having to, all of those small mindset shifts on the way through, have they changed in the last 5 years from what it looked like 5 years ago, the mind shift, or is it still the same? And I guess where I'm coming from there is that my thoughts are that up until about 2019, the startup world seemed to be in my mind and my experience with it was almost like two phases. There's the one struggling around that really didn't have much of an idea about a business at all, or they had a bit of an idea.
Mm.
And then there was the ones that really tended to get traction, and that is that they did have some, not just a good idea, but also some business acumen as well. And so that they
Yeah.
did get some runs on the board and move forward. Whereas
Yeah.
now I think that there's a much greater balance I think the balance is outweighed with people that have no business acumen, that have got an idea and really don't know where to start and make all of those mistakes we talk about. Are you finding there's much more of that than there has been in the past?
Look, I think the industry goes in cycles, and capital is obviously a lot harder to get now than it was 2 or 3 years ago. And I think we'd settled into a templated pattern. Some people call it the factory VC model, where you could make money as a VC by looking for B2B SaaS companies with high growth rates and packaging them up and selling them to the next size VC up the food chain, basically. So you could invest in a seed stage company. If you could demonstrate a decent clip of growth, you could go to a larger VC and say, look, these guys are doing so well. I think we need to raise a Series A round, and I think you'd be the perfect stats. And in many cases, a lot of that investment that was being put into those companies was going straight to marketing and sales. And so that it was essentially investor subsidized marketing that was driving those artificial growth rates. And that allowed that next round of capital to come in that then did the same thing. And the Series B guy would then put 40% of his capital into marketing, pump up more growth, and then find a Series C guy. And this sort of Ponzi scheme has gone on for a decade or more. And that's why we've got so many companies now having down rounds, because it had to stop somewhere. And it's starting to unravel now when people are hanging on as much as they can to those valuations and not giving up and not wanting to IPO and all those sorts of things. That's why we've got a backlog of IPOs.
Yeah.
That sort of factory VC model, I think, was really unhealthy for the industry, because investors really weren't adding value. They weren't really helping the founders with the fundamentals that we're talking about in now, which is find a great market, find a great problem, build a great solution, build a great marketing and sales experience where you're nurturing, you're creating great value that's creating advocates to drive the whole flywheel of growth. That wasn't the story that founders were hearing. And in fact, they were seeing people being successful by not doing that, which I think was really unhealthy. Yeah. And thankfully, that period seems to have passed. And now I see a lot more founders that are more authentic, more genuine. And because of the trends of personal brand and because AI can allow you to be more customer centric and create more customer outcomes, I think we're what I would describe as a bit of a golden age of founders and building companies, where it's got a lot more real very quickly in the last couple of years, which I just find such a joy to work with founders. Like, I'm doing this because I love it. I love the customers I'm helping. I love the problem that I'm solving. And I can see a way to a great financial outcome. It's of all worlds, right?
Yeah, absolutely. What's your process for helping a founder sharpen their pitch from generic to magnetic? Can you share a before and after that you've worked?
I think for a lot of founders, they're trying to sell a medium or a high price offer. I'm using sort of Russell Brunson's terminology here, or Alex Hormozi's terminology, in one step. I don't have the trust and credibility I need with the customer. I don't have the lead temperature with the customer where they're sophisticated enough to really understand what they need and the value of what you're providing as a vendor. And you're trying to sell the solution to the problem that you know you can solve, but they're not really ready yet. And so often it's a case of putting in place some sort of lead magnet offer where you've got a multi-stage sales journey where you can sell the customer something, deliver incredible value, also educate the customer to help them become more sophisticated and realize the value of the thing that you've got. And so I've been working with a girl in the US that is supporting wellness practitioners. I think yoga, massage, those sorts of business owners that often it's a lifestyle business for them. They love doing what they're doing, but from a business point of view, they're often really struggling. And it's because they haven't niched down and they haven't really got a great offer and all those kinds of things. And she's got a platform that helps these kind of people run much better businesses. And it's a complicated offer. And because she's dealing with a complicated set of problems, and to get her sales pipeline working, we put in place that health check, which was essentially to look at your business and let's look at where the challenges are and let's give you a rating and let's look at, where you want to be from a maturity level in say 6 months and then 12 months. And then based on that gap analysis, let's focus on closing those gaps and turn that into a 2-hour kind of strategy session where you're collecting some information from the customer. You're giving information back in terms of a report that's really well structured and really insightful. And then saying to look, here's where I think your gaps are. This is what you need to address. You can address them yourself. You can go hire someone else to address them, or that's what we do. We address exactly these gaps. And if you want to learn more about our offering for how we do that, I'd love to tell you about it. It's the Seth Godin permission marketing thing. We've got a dozen examples of where we've helped customers with exactly that, where you're really leaning into the nurture piece, the helping piece, and you're meeting customers where they're at with the offer, with an offer that's a no-brainer offer for where customers are at on their journey. And in many cases, the products and services that companies are trying to sell to customers, the customers are not ready yet to buy the offer that they really need. Then they need something in the middle. They need some sort of intermediate offer that's cheaper, that's quicker, that's faster. It's going to deliver great value. And so that's a great win for most businesses.
And that's a paid for service, that 2-hour consultation.
You bet. Yeah. But if you can take money from a customer and you can deliver extreme amounts of value, the customer's going to go, what else have you got that I can buy? That was that was a couple of $100. It was a great spend. What else have you got? What else have you got back there?
Yeah. What's your thoughts on free trials?
I'm pretty opinionated on free trials as being a really bad idea while you're trying to validate your business model. They become a good idea as a marketing device for some businesses. Once you know that you know what channels you're in, you know who your ideal customer is, you know what you need to do to nurture them, you've got a no-brainer offer, you know what your conversion rates are, then you can introduce free trials and you can see whether that moves the needle. Because it's a risk-adjusted strategy where you go, I'm giving away a bunch of free stuff, and am I going to get more in return than what I'm giving away? And if you don't have a benchmark before you do that, then what are you comparing it against? It's a bit like a money-back guarantee. Like we now have a money-back guarantee for our startup build a strategy session, but we didn't start there. We started off, and then we had a benchmark, and we found that lowers the barrier to make people go, oh, if there's a money-back guarantee, it makes it easier. And those are marketing devices that people read these blogs and books and whatever and think that these are the magic marketing tactic that's going to uplift their sales. But you got to get all the fundamentals right first. And if you look at a freemium business model, what are the conversion rates on freemium business models? They're like 3%. And so if you're a founder that's trying to figure out, have you got the right product in your right market and are you in the right market? 97% of the customers that you're talking to are never, ever going to be customers, ever. So you don't want to listen to their advice or how you need to change your product or your product experience. So you're trying to trawl through all this data to find the 3%, but it just doesn't make sense. But I'm pretty opinionated on avoiding that pain.
And likewise, I'm very opinionated on free trials, and I think they're the biggest farce because in my experience, there's no such thing as a free trial.
Yeah.
The effort that's required by the organization to properly adopt and implement whatever it is that they're doing. Yeah. It's just a piece of content's just popped into my mind to post this week. We've just launched a free trial. So as much as I'm in that mindset with you, we've just launched a free trial. But our free trial is you sign up, you put one snippet of code in the website, and that's it. We'll be live in 48 hours. Yeah. And I'm using that as a test to see how things go, if that can be a way for us to begin a product-led growth movement on a service, productized service. I've soft launched it. It's been, I would say, more successful than I expected it to be, which is pleasing. I've done such a minuscule soft launch with it that, look, the sort of numbers we're talking about, I would like to think that we'd get maybe 10 sign-ups. We ended up with twice that. We got 20 sign-ups, and I was pretty happy with the soft launch, which was really just my email list and close connections on LinkedIn that I sent some messaging out to, not selling it to them, but to who they
Yeah.
knew. So we ended up in a better position. So now I've got that whole next phase. Okay, so I've got some validation of the offer here. It's worked. Now, how do I go and broaden that out through
Mhm.
the much broader network of the PLG groups where it's has a natural home and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So we'll see
I mean,
how that goes. But
as you say, for many customers, there's nothing free. And if you're doing a trial, the trial is actually what's our before state. We put the product in place. We try and use it. What's our after state? What's the return on investment? Is it worth it? So it's the piece of work of actually doing the trial that's actually the work. And so you can probably say to a customer, look, here's a free trial. You can trial it yourself. Or here's a concierge trial service that we offer for you. You pay us $1,000 and we'll collect all this data and we'll do the analysis and we'll give you a report to say whether this was worth it or not. Is that $1,000 a better spend than you trying to figure it out yourself? We do dozens of these a month. We know what we're doing. We've got a system to deliver it. We're going to deliver way more value for $1,000. You'll spend thousands of dollars trying to get to the same outcome. And I think if you just give the customer that choice, customers they're going to be poor quality leads that aren't really committed to their outcome will probably choose the free trial. And customers are really committed on what the outcome will probably spend their $1,000. And that probably tells you all you need to know about free trials.
Yeah. The beauty of this is that everyone's moved on through past the free trial.
Yeah.
For us,
Yeah, that's great.
It was one of those things that it's going to be interesting. I need to talk to all of them and find out what their motivation was to sign up in the first place and where I've got a lot of learning to do from this whole process yet. So it's our first steps in the water. You've said that most startups fail not from a lack of effort, but from following the wrong roadmap. What's
100%.
one common early decision that silently kills momentum?
The obvious one is building a product and launching it. That is the big one. It's been happening for decades, and we've been talking about it for decades, but it still keeps getting reinforced. It gets reinforced by investors that are saying, what are you trying to build? And continuing to give companies money when they really shouldn't, by startup support programs. Like I say to founders, if you're in a co-working space and you look at all the founders around you and the process you're using to build your startup is like all the other founders around you, you're probably going to fail because you're all doing it wrong. We know the 95% failure rate is a thing. And if you go back to what is the right way, what is the way that we should be doing it, it's basically our company is built on the work of Steve Blank, who is a Stanford educator, he's a successful founder and investor. And he's the one that really, I think, really first started writing and codifying the process of customer discovery to validate demand before you start building products and the whole minimum viable product. Eric Ries of Lean Startup was his student. He mentored him. And so that's the thing. All founders have read the Lean Startup and understand about building an MVP, a minimum viable product. And that's the main takeaway from the Lean Startup. But the problem is that wasn't really the most important takeaway from the Lean Startup. The most important takeaway to learn cheaply by running lots of experiments to validate your business model and do things in iterations. And that's the thing that most founders are not doing. It's my belief, as crazy as this kind of sounds, is that most founders can be successful with their idea if they have enough iterations. If your idea is not completely stupid, like you go, I think cars can drive themselves and we should build autonomous vehicles. That's not a crazy idea, as it turns out, right? What's preventing you from being successful? It's all the learnings along the way. It's all, should we use cameras only or should we use LiDAR plus cameras? I don't know. We need to figure that out. Should we use electric cars or should we use petrol? I don't know. We need to figure that out. Should we do this in America or should we do this in China? Well, I don't know. We need to find. There's lots of learnings that you're going to have along the way. And it's through those iterations that you're going to figure out the answers to all those questions. And so if you can survive enough iterations, you'll figure it out. And I think most founders are setting themselves up structurally to not have enough iterations by, for example, going to an investor and saying, if I build this product, I'll be able to launch it and get these kind of revenue charts. And so everyone buys into that narrative, which is essentially a one-shot wonder that then people go, there's some sunk cost here and I'll give you another couple of goes. But yeah, everyone loses faith pretty quickly.
Yep, I get it. I was going to ask you, if a founder had to cut down their roadmap to just three priorities in the first 6 months, what would they be? But I'm almost sensing first 6 months, maybe it's three. I know 4-stage process, but I'm not sure that's necessarily a 6-month cycle.
The thing that I say to founders is every founder, the first product you sell is a conversation, a 30-minute meeting. That's the first product of every founder. And you have to treat it like a product. So the no-brainer value proposition of meeting with you as a founder, where someone would go, that sounds awesome. I'd love to speak to you. So if you are, I don't know, if you're, I don't know, selling vacuum cleaners or something, and you say to someone that runs a cleaning company, I speak to 20 vacuum cleaner owners a week, and I try and learn what's working and what's not working in the world of vacuum cleaners. I'd love to hear from you what's working, what's not working, and I'm really happy to share any insights that you might be interested in that I picked up. But that, for someone who's using vacuum cleaners, that's actually a pretty interesting value proposition.
Yeah.
A 30-minute meeting, I'm just going to send you a calendar link that you can choose a time of your liking. That's your first product. Get out there and sell that product and have as many conversations as you can to start learning about your problem space. Even if you're an expert, even if you've been running a cleaning company for 20 years and suddenly you want to build some sort of vacuum cleaner service and you think you know your industry, you don't, because you only have your experience, and now you're selling into a market of people that are probably way less passionate and way less experienced than you are. So you better go out and understand them. So that's the first piece of advice I have for every founder.
It's interesting, and it still comes back to it's all about them. It's all about them. You're selling
Yeah.
something they're not interested and passionate in. You need
Yeah.
to find out what it is that they're passionate in so that you
Yeah.
can match your messaging to enter the conversation that's happening in their head. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. And it comes down to what you said earlier, which is velocity and hustle. I like to think about one of the first metrics that a founder should have is conversation velocity. How many conversations can you have a week? Doesn't matter whether you're full-time or whether you're part-time, whatever capacity you've got, how many conversations are you having a week? Measure that. And then next week, can I do better? The week after, can I do better? That's a great measure of progress.
Yeah, excellent. You're big on small scale experiments. We've talked about that a couple of times through this conversation today. Can you give me an example where a lean test that's revealed a game-changing insight for a founder?
Yeah. I worked with a founder up in the Northern Territory that had an idea for strata management firms. And we did all the things that we've been talking about today, and very quickly worked out there's no business there. There's no paying customer. He was the happiest founder that I'd spoken to for some time at that point in time, because you've saved me so much money. I had this burning itch to build this product because there's a huge problem. He was a former strata manager. He experienced the problem daily. He was tearing his hair out over it. He said, there's got to be a solution. There was a solution. There was just no paying customer for it. And we were able to for that very quickly. And often when I say to people I work with founders, people want to know how much capital have we raised or how many unicorns have we built and those kind of things. But actually that kind of outcome is hugely valuable because it's all about capital efficiency. Our business is built on helping founders use their capital better. That's what's a good day for me. And sometimes that's having a win, and sometimes that's avoiding a loss.
Yep.
And so that's a great example. Now that founder's gone through several iterations using the system that we've talked about to get to a way better place. And so that's such a great story of helping people just learn how to innovate better and use their time and capital much better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So then almost, I guess, the next stage on from that, what's the fastest way a founder can test whether their messaging is actually resonating or just sounding nice?
Yeah, that's a great question. The short answer is I think mostly through conversation. Unless you're a dentist or a lawyer and you're in an established market that has established product categories where the messaging has already really been defined and people know what the value proposition is, which is not the case for most people that we work with. Most people we work with are building new product categories with new kinds of value propositions that don't exist in the way that they've existed before. So we're trying to figure that out. And the best way to do that is with conversations. But a lot of the wisdom in the startup space is create websites and run A/B tests. That's a very expensive way of collecting data and learning when you can just ring somebody, have a Zoom call, speak to 20 customers in a week. You're going to have much richer conversations. It's going to have all the context around why someone made a buying decision or why they didn't or why they would or all those kind of things. That is by far the most overlooked and most capital efficient way to learn about messaging. Once you've had those initial conversations, then you can go into the A/B testing to refine. But for that very early course understanding of what you need to do, the big rocks, to get those big rocks in place, it's conversations.
You know what? It's been really interesting. I do know of the signups that we've had in our new offer. They are predominantly, there's a quarter of them solid on outbound, and it's driving a reasonable amount of traffic. We're generating leads for them. The balance are all pretty well at such an early stage that the value proposition they most resonated with them was the conversations that don't generate leads, but it's just what you're talking about now. What's the first question that they're asking? The first or second question, what's their concerns? Are they asking about a particular feature, or is it pricing, or is it
Yeah.
that's been their value. So that absolutely
Yeah.
resonates. I think your conversations, even before you put pencil to paper, really, it's an idea in your head. Those
Yeah.
conversations should be taking place to see if somebody's prepared to pay for it. And then get
100%.
something to a stage where you can actually give somebody a piece of paper and say, okay, we'll put your moniker on this and give me a letter of intent that when I'm ready, you'll sign up
Yeah.
for it and pay for it. Then,
Yeah.
Kirk, it's been a fantastic conversation. I will get to how we can contact you, and we'll obviously put all the links in. Is there a preferred way that you prefer to see people get in touch with you?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn's probably the easiest way. If people want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, that's the easiest way to me. Yeah.
Sure.
I'll
Is
be
there
easy to
any
find.
question that I should have asked you that I haven't?
I'm surprised we didn't talk about AI. I'm not sure that's a bad thing, but I was expecting you to go there. How is AI going to change this whole conversation? That's probably the one.
Look, we can go there if you like. We've still got a bit of time if you've got time. I guess for me, it's one of those things that there's underlying fundamentals. I think AI is a tool that can be used to accelerate at this stage. And sure, it's going to take jobs and replace effort. But I think as businesses are scaling, the one business that comes to my mind at the moment when you talk about scaling from an AI perspective is Swan AI. I'm not sure you're familiar with those
Don't
guys.
know that. No.
3 founders and about 20 agents they've built now, and their intention is to build a 30 million ARR run business
Yeah.
with 3 founders, and that's it. And so
What problem do they solve?
they are building agents for businesses. So it's
Right.
like the customer support, it's managing inbound inquiries, it's actually a very good
So
question.
they sound like the software development agency equivalent of AI.
They're outbound actually. What they are is it's almost like a lead generation business,
Right.
but then manages the customer support as well. And things like monitoring when there's been an inbound inquiry, that sort of thing. They're aimed at a more enterprise business, so they're not selling
Yeah.
to startups. They're selling to more enterprise sized businesses. And it's been interesting to watch their journey because I think they did start off aiming at the smaller to medium market to start with,
Yeah.
but there's not the they're either people that like them that are building their own,
Yeah.
or they're at a stage where they either can't afford
Not
to
enough
build
return
their
on
own,
investment.
they're too far down, they've got too many people. It's like this
Yeah.
whole mess. Whereas at the bigger end of town, I think it's a lot easier to start to do that. We've already seen businesses start to reduce headcount fairly dramatically with AI. And who was it came out recently that said you're not allowed to recruit anybody unless you can prove the job can't be done? Yeah, no,
Yeah. Duolingo's been in the press a bit for that kind of.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What's your
Yeah, but
perspective on it?
I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head though, that the AI is nothing more than a tool at this point,
Hmm.
and it scales whatever you've got. And if you've got a bad marketing and sales process, it's going to scale that fabulously. And if you've got a good one, it's going to scale that fabulously. And so it comes down to, I think a lot of people think AI is some sort of cheat code that is going to prevent you from having to do some work. It's not at all. It's a tool. And like any tool, you have to be accountable for its output. And you've got to have pride in your work. And AI is just a tool that you're driving. And if it's producing garbage and slop, that's your fault. And you just got to have pride in your work and accountability. And I think that's part of the conversation that's out there. Is there are some people out there that are just trying to use it as a cheat code. And I think that's where things are going a bit astray.
And that's, I think, I sat in on a workshop with these guys a couple of weeks ago. There was another one scheduled, but they're in Israel, so they've actually postponed it with everything that's going on over there at the
Yeah.
moment. And the workshop in the workshop, they were quite transparent in saying that the biggest mistakes they made along the way was thinking that something should have been AI when in fact it was really an automation.
Yeah.
And they stumbled and failed and spent way too much money trying to get it to that next stage. And so they realized the first thing they've got to do is
Yeah.
nail the
100%.
process, get
Yeah.
it working. And then if it's working fine, there's no need to bring an AI into it
Yeah.
if it's purely an automation. And they've got several, they call that agents, but they really are, they said that they're nothing more than automations. Sure, there's a few
Yeah.
more connectors in there, but it's not AI making a decision in the process. It's just following a process. And
Yeah. Process designers and service designers, I think, are going to be massive growth careers. As you say, every AI needs the underlying business process mapped and designed. And I don't think there's enough talk about that.
no, I agree. I agree. I agree. Do you use AI often through the day?
We use it dozens and dozens of times a day. It's built into our product. So we're using it to analyze all of the diagnostics and the advice that we're giving to founders and looking for patterns. But it's very much human in the loop. So it's not, AI is not doing things on our behalf. AI is helping us do the things we're already doing.
Yeah, exactly. We're in the same boat. I mean, I use it myself personally. I couldn't tell you how many times a day, but I find it very useful when looking for trends and trying to pick up patterns and things that just with the human eye, it's very difficult to see.
Yeah.
Deep research, I find it's very good for that. We're actually using it now to sit beside our supervisors
Yep.
and supervise the agents
Yeah.
as well.
We do the same.
Our human agents, and it's helping bring some quick wins in terms of behavioural changes and improvements to our service and process.
Get opportunity. Yeah.
And quality assurance. Our quality assurance team uses it every day now, making sure that assessing the level of quality that we're output compared to the client's expectations. So that's been a big step up as well. And it means that we're able to, it multiplies the output that we can deliver with the team. We're a people-based business. Our vision is, or mission is 1 million jobs. But that's not necessarily going to be through our business, but through our clients, obviously, as we help them grow. And we've got AI that's on this, bless you, we've got AI that's on this completely different bent to, I think it's been seen the wrong way in a lot of places where it's a tool to eliminate jobs and tasks. And I think you're never going to get away from that when you've got businesses whose investors demand the greatest return on capital that you can deliver.
Yeah.
And so that's always going to happen. But I think that there's a whole piece around where can it actually help multiply the output of humans. And sure, there'll be tasks that will skip over to AI, but
and that fundamentally underpins our business. I think AI is going to mean that companies need less people, which means we need more companies.
Yes.
I think that's the future, is more people will be running companies than are today, which I think is exciting. Exciting.
Yeah. But there's other, I guess, complications or factors or considerations when there's more companies. Does that mean it's more competitive? Does it mean they're less profitable?
No, I don't think so. I think it's a case of you can be more niche. You're global with a lot of these companies. You can be global, so you can be serving a global client base. One of my favorite stories is the rise of Grammarly. Like, I used to work for Microsoft selling Microsoft Word, right? And spell checker was a feature among thousands of features in that product.
Yes.
And here you've got a company that's taken one feature out of that old school product and built an entire unicorn out of it worth billions of dollars. And I think that's the story going forward, is we're going to see a lot better solutions to niche problems, because the global market is there for those niche problems.
Yeah.
And for every problem that we solve, we actually create 10 new problems. And that's what people don't necessarily always remember. Social media comes out, and now I've got to post to social media, and I've got to author better, and I've got to take better photos, and I've got to moderate it. One solution creates another 10 opportunities, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, I agree. And I think that in terms of more businesses niching, I like that concept. More businesses, I think, also run at lower cost, which means that there's efficiencies to be gained overall as well.
Yeah. You just have to go about your daily life and go, am I happy with the way that I get my house built, or the way that I see a doctor, or the way that I get my groceries, or any area in life? And you can see 1,000 businesses that are just waiting to be built when the economics are and the technology is right.
Exactly. Dirk, thank you. I've enjoyed this conversation immensely.
Yeah, me too. It's been great.
One last question for me. Any books that you'd recommend that you're reading recently, or that you'd recommend our listeners that they should get into, particularly obviously with your niche and the founders in particular, we're finding with our new offer that seems to be the market that we're entering into now, where we've not been there before. We've been
Right.
always dealing with much more established businesses, but with our new offer, then we're finding there's a lot more early stage businesses that
Yeah.
we've been involved with in the past.
That's great. Yeah, really good. Look, there's a ton of books depending on where people are on their journey and what their background is and so forth. But I think some good foundational books are, like, if you haven't read The Lean Startup, I think that's a really important one by Eric Ries. I think Peter Thiel, not everyone loves his politics, but his book is very good on 0 to 1, talking about some of the basic sort of fundamentals of building a disruptive business. I think you're thinking about marketing. There's books like .com Secrets by Russell Brunson or Story Brand by Donald Miller are great books just to get your head around some of those marketing kind of concepts. So yeah, there's a few to throw out there.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Very good. I must admit, I haven't read the Lean Startup.
It's a nice easy read. It's a nice easy read.
Yeah, okay. No, it's good. I'll take a couple of those away and shove them on my reading
list
as well.
Good one.
So thank you,
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, appreciate you being on the chat, and we'll get to chat again soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, thanks so much.